So hey everybody, this is Paul Smyers again, talking about real estate in Virginia, and I have VirginiaLandowner.com and this YouTube section. I specialize in rural property, country homes, estates, and that sort of thing, farms and land. And I want to talk a bit about how to sell my mobile home. That's a really big question a lot of people have. How do I sell my mobile home? Because the banks don't want to finance your mobile home for a buyer, so a lot of times there's an issue. And for example, in one of my other videos, I talked about buying a mobile home and having it moved to your own lot. Now, there are a lot of places in the country and a lot in Virginia where people have a nice mobile home or an older mobile home a lot of times on some nice land. After some years of living there, maybe they want to sell it. But the problem is they think, okay, well, there's people who want to buy the land and the house, but they don't want to, they can't get a loan, you see, so that presents a real problem for selling. Now let's talk a little bit about value in numbers, just to give some round numbers and just to make it really easy. Let's say there's a piece of land that has 5 acres. Nice piece of land, it's decent, has a driveway there, septic, and well, and the mobile home's sitting there. It's been there for a long time, and maybe it could have been there for 30, 40, 50 years. Now, typically, if you want to buy that lot, just a bare lot, that lot is probably, let's say, is 5 acres, and let's use a number of 3,000 an acre for really raw land for nothing, just trees. And then you'd have to buy, you'd have to put a septic in there, and you have to put a well. Let's say the septic costs about 20 grand. That's a pretty big job. They got to bring in these big machines, and there's all these regulations, and it's to be built a certain way, and it's a mess. So now you're talking about $15,000 plus a $20,000 septic, and let's say the well is, say, $3,000. Someone comes in, and assuming it's a decent, easy place to make a well, $3,000 or $4,000. Then next thing you know, you have a well. So you got a driveway. Then you don't have a driveway yet. So you got to have a little driveway. You got to clear some trees. You got to bring in some machines for that. Now that prepared lot, instead of being $15,000, we're really talking about another, 30,000. So let's use a round number. Okay, you got your driveway, you got the septic, and you got a well. You got a piece of land of 5 acres, and you're in it for like 40,000 or close to 50,000. Well, then you got this home sitting there, and it's really hard to put a price on what that home is worth, because if the guy wants to, if you want to sell your mobile home and it's sitting there on some nice land, but the home is old, the options that you have is to sell it to somebody who wants to buy just the home, and then you build your home or get a better mobile home on the property that you have. So that's one option if you want to sell. Sell the mobile home itself as one piece. Say, okay, sell for a good price. There are people out there looking for those mobile homes. If it's decent condition, there are people out there who will pay cash. They're going to want to make a little bit of money on it, but they will pay cash. There are other people who would like to buy it, but maybe don't have enough cash. So if someone buys it, it means they have some cash, and they're going to put it somewhere, and they want to get a pretty good deal, because it's a lot of work to move a mobile home, but it's possible. So let's say you want to sell it that way. You say, okay, well, 10,000. A lot of them go for that, 10, 15,000 or whatever. Okay, so if someone has the cash to buy that, they're going to put it somewhere, and maybe they'll rent it for something. Or maybe they can buy a mobile home for $10,000 and pay $5,000 to put it up on a new place, and then they will rent it out for $500 a month or something like that, and then they plan to make some money. So one way to sell it is just to sell the mobile home itself, and then bring in something different or build a home there. To try to sell the mobile home with the land together, now you're talking about, again, $50,000, say, plus the mobile home. So now you want to now somebody's got to buy $60,000, $70,000, and typically people who live in their home, they say, well, I got this beautiful home here. I should be able to get $80,000, $90,000 for this thing. Maybe I should get $100,000 because it's a home on 5 acres. But realistically speaking, when the buyers come knocking, they're not necessarily going to have $100,000 in cash to buy your property all at once. And if they did have $100,000 in cash, there's a good chance they'd put it down on a decent house and buy that instead. So the price point, I came across one I was looking for one time that had 15 acres and a decent home. We want to sell it for $135,000. Like, huh? Yeah, who's walking around with $135,000 that is going to buy a mobile home? Because if they have that much cash, they're probably going to buy something else. So the way to buy a property like that would be from an investor. Say, okay, I'll buy that mobile home. I'll pay your price. I got the money, but I'm going to either divide up the land or I'm going to build another house there. I got a profit motive involved in buying this because I'm not just going to live there, most likely. If you have $135,000 to buy a place to live in, it's probably not going to be a used mobile home on those 10 acres or whatever. So one way that people can sell a mobile home that has some value is to take a little bit of a note, not for very long and not a risky note. Let's say, for example, you have someone say, look, I got that $50,000 property and it's got, with all the improvements, and I got a mobile home on a property that's livable and decent shape, and you know what the value is. It's hard to pinpoint a value on that house. But let's say, you know, it's a livable house, and let's say you give a round number of $75,000 for a piece of property with a livable home on it. That's not a heck of a lot of money, really, when you think about it, especially if the land is good and it's got some other outbuildings or something like that. But that's a chunk of money. So maybe if someone is a good credit, let's say both people in a family work and they got a decent income, maybe they just have steady, long, provable income, but for some reason they want to buy that mobile home and they like that location, or maybe have a plan for it that someday they're going to live there and it's a long-term investment, they're going to upgrade it someday, so they're willing to put out some money and they got a solid basis and they got some cash to down. Well, what if they had, if you need to get out of that mobile home and your net is worth, say, $75,000, well, what if they had $25,000? What if they had $30,000 cash and a 3 or 4 year note with a balloon payment? Say, okay, we'll give you 3 years of paying on terms or an X amount of, you know, with a certain interest rate, and then at the end of that 3 year period, I want all of the money, I want to be paid off and be out of here. Okay, so if you can manage that, sometimes it's a really good thing, because you might be able to get a little bit more interest rate on it and say, okay, I'll take the $25,000 down, and then I'll take a note that's amortized over, say, 15 years, but we'll actually call a balloon payment in, say, 5 years or even like 3. Say, okay, you got 3 years to get your act together and get established in this place, and then I want to be paid off. So now the people that move in, they have 3 years to figure something out. Now they can start improving the property right away and make it better and more valuable. And if they want, they can build their own home there, or they can. They might want to lease it out. Some people actually buy with the intent to lease. Say, okay, an investor might say, okay, I'll pay you that money, but I'm not going to live there. I'm just going to have someone. I'm going to rent it out and make a profit. There are people who ask a mobile homeowner, can I rent to own? That's another thing. If you have really clever, you got to have a good agreement so that you don't get messed up in it. So let's say that people do want to rent, or that basically they'll be paying a payment for a few years, and you can make a profit. And then at the end, you get another chunk of money when they can go to their bank and refinance and get some kind of a loan to finish off the payment. You see, meanwhile, it's a win-win situation. So it can happen. So if you do have a mobile home and you do want to sell it, then think about that option as being basically a loan. You can be self-financed sort of for a few years, not for a really long time, just 2 or 3 years. Another way is, let's say, there are people who want to rent a mobile home and they can't buy, and there's a lot of people like that in Virginia. They have a decent job, maybe it's in a trade or something, they make some money, they've been paying their bills for quite a long time, and they see the mobile home and saying, okay, maybe I can't buy it for me yet, but maybe you can be a landlord. Now, you got to be careful about who you get as a tenant, always. That's the way it always is, trying to get a good tenant. But if you find some responsible people, say, look, I need to move, I want to sell my mobile home, I can't really sell it, I can't really finance it very well, but I can rent it out. Let's say it's already paid for, you've had it for 20 years or something, you might be able to rent it out for $500, $600, $700 a month, or even more, depending on what kind of situation it is. And then your rent that you're getting is sufficient to pay for maybe a mortgage on a better piece of property, so you can actually move. You see, so if you do want to sell a mobile home, start thinking a little bit about what you're willing and able to do to help your buyer, because if you really want to move, then you need to be able to negotiate and be a little bit flexible about it, because the banks really don't want to touch a mobile home. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. Now, you can get some other kinds of credit and personal loans and things like that. Another thing I mentioned quickly, again, in another video I mentioned this, sometimes people who have property, if you have a place that you want to sell and someone says, look, I don't have the cash, but I got this tractor over here and it's worth $10,000, and and you need a tractor, you say, well, I'll take the tractor, or maybe I'll get a good deal on that and I won't have to go make a loan on another tractor. I can trade what I have for something else. So think about the win-win possibilities whenever you're trying to sell a mobile home, because you got to be a little bit creative with that. And again, these videos, I try not to make them too long, but please feel free to ask questions or call me and have a conversation. You can leave comments below or use my phone number or email. So thanks again for listening.